Hi guys, I've finally got round to doing another video diary. This was filmed a couple of months ago, and I've just got round to editing it. So forgive me if I stumble on some of the things that I wanted to go over in some of these clips that I've edited. But some of the footage was really ropey, so I've cut down, I don't know, nearly 10 gigs worth of footage. Down quite a lot really to just get something that was decent. So first thing you're seeing here is a miniature that's been primed in grey. In the background, you'll probably see a large tub of paint that says grey primer. It's a 200mm grey primer from Vallejo, and it's the new type of primers they do, the polyurethane, and it is very good. It goes down way thinner and smoother than any rattle can primer I've ever used. The only one benefit it doesn't receive over the rattle can primers is that the tough finish you get out of those rattle can primers is pretty much the best. But as primers go, it does still give it a really tough finish if you leave it, 4 or 5 hours. It really is nice. So I definitely recommend anyone with an airbrush to actually get hold of this polyurethane primer. It's definitely the way forward. So over the primer base coat, I'm actually using Model Air Black that I've thinned down a little bit, just so I can get really thin lines, and I'm trying to show that on camera at the moment. So here I'm actually using Vallejo Game Colour White, and in that bottle there, that's not the airbrush thinner, it's just the bottle, but the actual blue substance you're seeing there is Windoline. It's cleaner. I really get on well with this. It depends on what your preference is. Some people like using the Vallejo thinner, but I think with an airbrush, and you'll see in a minute, using this stuff, the paint thins absolutely perfect. The brush I'm using here it's a flat brush, very similar to the large dry brush you get from GW, but the bristles are a bit softer, and it enables me to make sure that there's no lumps or clumps in the paint. I can really get a good mix on. Yeah, and I'm just popping the paint in there. You could argue that some paint's obviously going to get wasted on the palette there, whereas it wouldn't if you actually mix the paint in the cup, but you run the risk of little bits of paint settling in the bottom of the cup that's not mixed properly, and then you get all sorts of problems with your airbrush clogging and having to constantly clean it. So that's why I do it on the palette there. Okay, so sorry, excuse me. I've not got a lot of footage of me doing the black pre-shading, but you can see pretty much here all of the black pre-shading was done. And now what I'm doing, I'm going back in with that white that you see me thin down, the Vallejo Game Colour White, and I'm starting to go back in and highlight some of those areas that are just too dark that I did with the black in the pre-shading stage. So already we've got the grey from the base colour, we've got the black that I used for the shading, and now I'm going back in again with white. So that's what I'm doing here. And you'll notice that I've just sprayed a bit on my nail there, and you should have seen pretty much how thin and accurate I could get that spray on my nail there. And I think at this stage I'm just dotting the needle a little bit forward and a little bit back, just to try and feather in the highlight on I think it's his elbow pad there. Okay, and here I'm actually going for a much thicker spray cone, which unfortunately the camera doesn't pick up, but I'm going all over the top of the model where the light's going to be hitting more, and I'm just going backwards and forwards, and on the top of the shoulder pauldron there, it's going to be much lighter than the bottom part of the shoulder pauldron. It's quite a false technique, because in reality you wouldn't see that much of a difference, but on a miniature this scale, it really does add a really interesting look to it. Okay, I was just spraying a little bit on the paper there, because every now and again when you're spraying at low PSI and you're trying to really spray out thin and accurately, you can tend to get little clogs on. You might even actually see the needle. There's got to be a paint on it, and I'm sure at some stage I'll probably try and pick it away with my nails there. So again, just very, very slowly building up the highlights and trying to get rid of some of those areas of shadow that shouldn't be there. And you'll see there I'm working on the very bottom part of the leg armour there where that big bobble is, and I'm just slowly smoothing the bottom parts of each plate back up. And I think the top of the shoulder pauldron there needs a little bit more of a highlight, so I'm just bringing that up a bit more. Okay, now I'm going back in with a brush. Now the paint there, again, it's pretty much thin with the Windoline. Again, it's like super thin milk. You probably see how translucent it is on the actual palette there, and it might seem that how I'm painting it with a brush here doesn't seem that accurate, but the paint's so thin that when it actually dries, it'll be you won't notice the difference in colour that much. It's because it's still drying, but when it dries, it'll blend back in nicer. This is a stage that you don't necessarily need to do. This is just to make sure that when I actually go in with the colour, it really is going to make areas that I want to pop do just that, basically. And you could argue saying, well, why couldn't you just pre-shade and then go straight back in with a paintbrush with a white? Well, then you wouldn't get on the larger panels of armour that really nice subtle blending. So the brush is only literally for the extreme areas where I really want a certain area to pop out. So it's a mixture of the two techniques, the paintbrush and the airbrush together, that makes it work, really. Okay, being really delicate not to, or careful I should say, not to put too much paint on. And I'm just concentrating on the very bottom part of each of those panels there. So the transition will go from the top areas where the shadows will be forming. And here I'm just working on placing down the paint on the front part of the knee pads. But if you notice, I'm not working on the extreme sides of the leg because that'll be heavily in shadow from the leg that's in front of it. So trying to be mindful of where you think the area will be darker. And here you can see I'm just focusing on the front part of each of the legs, but not too much on the sides. And as the paint starts to dry, you notice it blends back in with the other colours much nicer. But I'm not doing this super careful as if I was painting using colours, because the actual paint, the red paint that I used, the Scarlet Red, will actually hide a few of the blemishes. So as long as I'm fairly careful, that's all that really matters. And using this technique, you can be as subtle or and you can take it as far as you want. I mean, you can see here that you can pretty much see hardly any black at all, but you can really make the actual transitions in colours as bold as you want, really. But I try and make it more subtle. So when you're actually picking the miniature up, it looks better in your hand than it does on camera, unfortunately. Okay, and here I tried to get it into macro, just on the camera. You can see it's not 100% perfect, and you'll see a bit of transition down on the bottom part of that leg bit there and underneath, where I'll sort that out a little bit later on. But I could spend another half an hour or so making that transition perfect, but there's no need because the red will cover up any of the slight blemishes. And that's what I'm doing here now. Now, the Vallejo, you might see it in the top left-hand corner of the bottle there. That's Vallejo Model Air Scarlet Red. And I thin it down a tiny little bit with a Windoline, which is not necessary in the sense that it's thin enough to go out the airbrush nice and smooth, but it's so I can control how much of that pre-shading and grayscale uh, that I've got underneath there with the grey, the black and the white. And again, this is just how I go about doing it. I mean, if you wanted to replicate the technique and take it further, you can really make those panels pop, but by laying down the black shadow much thicker and not going back in with a white as much. But again, it's preference. And I try and do it a little at a time rather than blasting the whole miniature. I try and do it a bit at a time so I can actually see how the shadows are getting picked up bit by bit, really. I have to apologise for the way I keep twisting it round on the camera there. It's not the best, if I'm completely honest. Best footage. And also you'll notice all the paint on my fingers. I actually tend to use my fingers as a makeshift palette, and I'm not saying it's the best thing to do, it's just how I've always painted, and it works for me, but I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, so apologies for my dirty hands that you see in holding the miniature there. And also I recommend everyone, I mean, if there's one huge tip I can give anyone that's starting out, put your miniatures on a plinth. To be honest, most of the time that they're either on empty bottles or empty paint tubs, but it's so much more comfortable to paint your miniatures that way, and you also don't risk the chance of making the paint smudge or chipping it off with your fingers as you're holding the miniature. So definitely hold a miniature on a plinth there. You'll definitely find that once you get in the habit of just sticking a bit of blue tack underneath them and popping them down, that it's much better than actually holding the miniature in your hand. Okay, here I'm using Vallejo game colour inks, and I'm mixing black ink and red ink, and just standard water, really. But again, I'd recommend distilled water there, if you can get hold of it. Okay, and just mixing it together. I want like a very deep burgundy colour, not too dark, but again not too light, because this is for the pin wash. And the miniature has been gloss varnished with Vallejo with the airbrush, just sprayed all over it. No real technique to it, just blasted all over the miniature and let it dry for about 3 or 4 hours. And the inks and the gloss varnish enables the capillary action in the brush to just literally let the paint suck into the crevices and the cracks to actually form some really deep shadows that are going to make those armor plates really pop. And also showed you a minute ago some isopropanol that was in a bottle, and I'll show you what that's used for in a moment. It's used for cleaning up, so you need both of them at hand, really. Okay, and the reason you gloss varnish is for two reasons. One, you want to protect the miniature, and you would not be able to do the pin wash without that gloss varnish, because this isopropanol will strip the paint off your mini if it wasn't for the gloss varnish. And that's what it's doing here. I purposefully put excess ink wash on to show you how I can literally remove it with the isopropanol, and I think I do the same here. I'm going to flood the miniature with paint. There you go, I just slapped it all there, and I didn't want all that ink wash there. And I'm just showing you how inaccurate you can be with it, and it'll still follow the form of the creases and the crevices. Okay, and this here I'm actually using some microsol and some microset. Now these are decal setting solutions. The microset is the most crucial of the two, as it acts like a glue, if you like. It helps the miniature really stick down and stay on the miniature, whereas the microsol acts like a melting agent that helps it melt around uneven surfaces. Um, Again, the gloss varnish really helps with your decals. It helps them to follow the form and flatten down much easier than if it was on a matte surface. Okay, so that was me just putting the decal down. Now I've got the decal down, I'm using again that flat, soft brush. Now there's enough stiffness and pull on the brush to help me flatten it down, but the bristles are very soft on this brush. I'm not sure if it's sable. I think it might be, to be honest. But I know that using the large dry brush from GW would be no good, because the hog hair bristles there would be just too stiff and they'd rip the decal apart. So I've found that using this type of brush is even better than using cotton buds, because they don't follow the form perfectly. So using this type of brush, as you can see, I'm putting some force down there, and I'm making sure every single part of the decal's flattened there, and I'll probably fiddle about with that for 30 seconds to a minute. And if at that stage of making sure I've got rid of all the excess microset from underneath the decal, it's still not perfect, I'll probably go back in and add a tiny drop of microsol to the top of the surface. Okay, here I've pre-mixed my own varnish mix, which is Vallejo gloss varnish, 1 part gloss varnish to 4 parts matte. So I've made my own satin varnish, if you like, so that's the matte varnish, and I mixed it up in that tiny little tub you can see there, and then I poured it into the airbrush. You can buy pre-made satin varnish from Vallejo, but yeah, I've mixed my own to what the finish I like. I also just showed you there some airbrush cleaner. You really need airbrush cleaner after varnishing your miniatures. So here I'm just giving it the final varnish, which is to actually get rid of that horrible high gloss finish to the miniature. So I'm just going to have a drink, sorry guys. Yes, so just finishing up there really. And that's, I mean, this is in a nutshell pretty much how I paint most of my reds. I mean, it's not finished, I mean, there's no highlighting done, but I've had many, it's my own fault really, messages saying, what's this grayscale technique? I mean, kind of stupid phrase really, but I wanted to try and explain that it's not exactly just pre-shading, but yeah, this is pretty much it. It's fairly straightforward to do, but you can take it as far as you want, to be quite honest. I don't know what I'm trying to show on the camera there. It's probably some kind of brush flow that I forgot what I was trying to get at when I filmed it a couple of months ago. So yeah, bit of boring footage here. I don't know why I didn't edit this out, but yeah, that was just me adding the final satin varnish, and that's it. Thank you for watching, guys. Please rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.